Hi, everyone.
Morning, Professor.
Hey.
Good morning.
Morning. Oh, remember,
Hello.
you can't touch the keyboard. Okay. All right.
I want some milk. You.
All right. Daddy will get you some milk.
No, you will get some milk.
No, I can't right now, kiddo.
No, yeah, guys.
I can't leave.
Come.
Oh, sweet boy.
No.
So, Abby. So I'm trying to remember who had their presentation today. It's Lady and maybe also Megan. Oh, Gus. Oh. You can stay, but you have to. And you can't touch the keyboard, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't want that milk, okay. Things are devolving a bit here. Someone's really tired of being in the house. Let's see. So 16.
I just wanted to let you know that Jenna said that she's having computer issues.
Okay, sounds good.
I don't know if she's gonna come on, but she just told me to let you know.
Okay, put these in. Thanks, Anne. All right, so let me just take attendance real quick. Sorry about all of that. All right, let's see. We got Anne is here, Abby is here, Cicely is here, Kiari is here, Maya is here, Alicia's here, Ross is here. I don't see Megan. Is Megan here that I'm just not seeing? Okay. Adriana, it doesn't look like she's here. Okay. Looks like Jenna is able to get on. Liam's here. Taylor's here. Soleil's here. But Sydney. Yep. I see you. Lady's here. Ashley's here. Jenna is here. Katie's here. Darian's here. Michael's here. But I don't see Jake. Okay. All right, so let's get started with Lady's presentation. Let me make you a co-host, Lady. All right, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So today's presentation is going to be domestic violence. Am I doing this right? Share, yeah.
Nice.
Okay. And one of the readings I did was the first one, and is kind of explain everything. Domestic violence is kind of violence or abuse in domestic setting, but it can be like other stuff, like other strangers violence that can that can actually are like the most common violence are the family or inmate partner. So the first one what I'm going to talk about is how family are common environment for emotional and physical violence. And one of the stats that they show is like 1 in 5 high school girls reported to be either physical or sexually abused at home. Other stuff saying that spouses also have some inequality towards in the family inside, and it's kind of weird because like in those times it was hard to maintain a like sorry
No worries.
a
Take your time.
it's hard.
Yeah.
And those like in the mid women it used to be like a property instead like being having like a human rights. So one of the other common is the inmate partner, and it say that 4 women they are killed by the inmate partner, and it happens to like everyone, happens to like non-heterosexual, but are more common to heterosexual. So 37 of women that visited the ER were injured by male partners, and one of the thing is that um make them feel less valuable when someone is trying to um, talk, and because of that, a lot of women are not going like I'm not speaking about. One of the things is the evaluation of women's labor. So because of that, women get paid less, and by that, the women's um, stay with their abusive partners financially because they cannot take themselves with them. And also the women of color are less likely to report domestic violence because of racism with the police. And also the police like make them feel like shit, by the way. And they also don't want to expose their partner to the criminal justice system. And it's also because of that, and disproportionately locked up people of color, like they like lock just because looking at you because you're like a people of color, they're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna throw you um in the jail just because. And also immigrants are less likely to report for fear of immigration in ICE, because they fear that they'll send back their partner, even if the undocumented woman has a baby in the U.S., they can stay with the baby. But the male partner has to like send them back because they're illegal in the U.S. And it's kind of sad that because of this stats that we have, um, white women, black women, or like other like women of color is less is is oppressed by like the society, is oppressed by the family that make them feel less, and also because of the way the medical field show them that if they have if they experience some kind of domestic violence, they put them as a they syndromedize instead of like helping them how to get how to sorry. Okay, so in the medical field, they make them feel like it's part of the number instead of like helping them how to overcome the domestic violence, how to um well anyways, so one of the syndromes that they use is the battered woman syndromes. And it's basically describe a woman that returned to her abuser because he promised not to hit her again, but continues to do so, which is like kind of behavior of women who've been sexually abused but doesn't report any rape for days or months, or doesn't remember parts of the assault. Also, too calm or expressing anger towards police, hospital, legal system. And and like I said, it's kind of sad, like how the medical, political family is make them feel less worthless, making it like a number, and instead of teaching, instead of trying to get the abuser, like one of the um symptoms of like the abuser to be abused. So I have one question, and is, what are some clues that indicates that someone is victim of domestic abuse, and how can we reduce domestic violence as a community?
So right off the bat, I think it's difficult to be able to tell if someone's a victim of domestic abuse. Like you had talked about earlier in your presentation, it's really common, unfortunately. It's a lot more common than we all know because it isn't reported as much as it should be due to maybe they're in a relationship, they don't want the partner getting in trouble, they think that they can change the person, number of reasons. Um, but yeah, so I think it's really difficult to be able to tell that someone's being abused domestically, but yeah.
Yeah, also in the reading say that even though there's some stats, but it's just because those women just want to are and report and number it grossly under, like it's under like the number I was like the actual number is, and there's a lot more stuff, and also like the family domestic is just coming and no one talk about it, just no one talk about it, and it's so sad.
Maybe also we talked about the link between violence and masculinity. So maybe as a culture, we need to change that to kind of help with domestic abuse and domestic violence.
I think that we can all reduce domestic. I mean, there's no way to really reduce it, but as a community, I think that if we all stick together and trust each other, like I feel like one of the main reasons why a lot of people don't come out about stuff like this is because no one fully believes them or believes that the incident really happened. You know, doing the domestic violence, etc. I just feel like that if we all stick by each other's side and, you know, tell each other that we're there for them, it may help people come out more and leave those toxic relationships that they are in.
Believe women.
Yeah, because that's a big part of it. No one wants to speak out about anything because it's like we aren't heard. So what's the point? You're going to go to jail for what, a year and then come back. You know what I mean? It's that's at least how I feel about a lot of things. It's hard.
Yeah, and also they instead of blame the abuser, they blame the victim.
Exactly. It's your fault. You did something.
Yeah.
I know.
It's like, oh, you showed too much skin. Oh, it's your problem. Or like, your dad hit you. Oh, because you deserve it.
You did something. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Too, like going off what Anne said, yeah, just like mimicking that I feel like there aren't great laws in place. I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't even have the education on it, so it's hard to say. I feel like there's not a lot to protect women, or at least in the past there hasn't. I'm not sure if it's getting better. But I think that also goes to show the fact that we don't really know is like a big indicator that there's needs to be something that changes within our culture and society, because I feel like similar to like rape, or like it kind of all falls under the same spectrum with women, like we're less likely to believe them, or like you said, like ask like, well, what circumstances happened, like what was leading to this like decision, like, or to not believe them as much.
I think like in my own experience, and I won't show my face because I literally just woke up, but in my own experience as an RA, I have handled a domestic abuse situation, and I obviously can't explain much because Nichols is so small and it's so terrible, but like handling a situation like that, even with like the little bit of training that I had, and even Ross can chime in as like a fellow RA, like it's scary as fuck. I'll be straight up. It was absolutely horrifying to like just even finding it, was like coming across it, and there were other people around too where it did happen, and people were just like walking by, and I'm just like, holy shit, like this is a real thing that's happening. And I didn't even think I didn't even want to believe it. I was like, this isn't something that happens at Nichols, like it's such a small school. And like a big factor too, once you started to investigate, and the police showed up, and we had to talk to the, like, you know, an RA talking to the cops. I didn't think I'd be doing that, but a huge factor too is like alcohol. I think that's like what happened with the situation that I had to handle, was like the guy was visibly like totally drunk, and even the girl was drunk too, which obviously isn't her fault, but like it's just alcohol is like a huge factor in this.
Yeah, there was some like some stuff going on, like, and even in high school or like in college, there's always something about related to like drinking. There's always something happening. It's like there's no consent, and it became like a rape. And it's like that, like you say, it's very sad, and it's very so like it's so much pressure. Like this thing, they're going to investigate. They're gonna like what happened, how they're gonna like talk to everyone who was related to it, and it's heartbroken. And I also I have some experience about domestic violence. My dad hit me physically, and I went to school like that, high school, and how you said those child how I forgot the
Protective services.
yeah, the child protective services went home, asked some other question, and because my dad was a nice person, they drop everything. So that's that's the reason why all the children of women don't want to speak up, because there's other people who press them to speak up more.
Yeah, it triggers them too, because just because they, you know what I mean, like having child protective services show up at their door, it's going to make them feel a certain type of way, which can make them even more angry at you
Mhm.
and take it out on you in a way.
Sorry. I think like a huge part of it is like the power dynamic of it all, because like what a lot of people were saying, like alcohol is like a huge part of it, and it can be, but like even in the reading, like one of the things that it talked about was how like a lot of times like people say it has a lot to do with anger, or like people who are like out of control, but a lot of times it has to do with people who are like in control, like abusers who want like the power over their spouse or whatever. And, like I think lady, you made this point about how like people who like a lot of times people who are abusers were abused themselves. So it's like in their life, like they've experienced powerlessness, and now they have like this opportunity to have like the one up on this person that's in their life. It's like this like vicious like cycle. And I think that's like another huge thing, is like a part of like education, and like but why it's so important to help people who have been abused, because a lot of times if you don't get the help that you need and you've experienced that in your life, like you'll end up like doing the same thing like later on to somebody that you care about, or somebody in your life or whatever.
Yeah, that's why we call the abusers, like the people that are being abused, survivors instead of victims, because it will make them feel like we make them feel minimized, instead like make them like devalue and like self them, like just go out and just talk about it, and like the feelings, and whatever they have.
I also feel like a big reason that this happens is because in our culture, like just the masculine culture, we only really let men show anger. It's not like really culturally acceptable for them to like have any other emotions other than like anger. And I feel like so we are teaching men that the only way they can express themselves if they have a problem or if something is going on, especially with mental health. And I think there's like a mental health crisis in our like globally, just like I think that they are being taught like growing up to express their anger in a sense of like violence, especially with women, because like then it goes into like the culture of women and how women are viewed, and like it just I feel like it all falls back on like this like, toxic masculinity of men thinking they have control over women because that's what they're told, like what's considered cool to like sleep with a lot of women. Like it just that's my opinion. Like it's all ties back into like this like cycle of like how men are allowed to express their like emotions. And I think if they were able to have like if it was more culturally acceptable for them to like have emotions similar to women or like be more vulnerable, like which is still not as culturally acceptable for even women, but like if it was more allowed, I think this would be less of a problem.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've never understood is just the fact that like we teach this from such a young age. We teach it to be acceptable, to be abusive to just women, but also the other way around. Where I remember as a kid, and it's still like said, but there's always that saying that's like, why is like the little kid like pushing or being abusive or just any sort of violence towards another one? It's because they like you. It's because they have a crush on you when you're younger and everything. And that just never made sense to me. Like it just doesn't add up. And it's just one of those ways that we're making this behavior more acceptable for abusers because they learned it from such a young age. And I think just like the professor had said, this really builds up to like rape and stuff like that, where it's like we don't have the education, we make it so normalized. And if we just started educating from a younger age that like now like you can't abuse people, like I think it's become better, like we've started teaching it more, but it's so weird that it's normalized at such a young age.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with Mike there, just because like I feel like ever since then it starts at a young age, and all of a sudden the kid grows up to have a sense of entitlement to do these type of things that's so awful to other people, even to a point where specifically, especially if you play some type of sport, you're good at that type of sport, you might go major leagues or something like that. You see every year is a different case in the NFL for some person involved in some domestic violence. So it's like I feel like it's a point where everybody has to hold everybody accountable, no matter what their background is or what they do. And if you see something, say something specifically, just because no matter what they do or how they do it, domestic violence isn't a good thing. You know what I'm saying? You can't put it backwards, forwards, whatever. It's not a good thing. So I think if it's involving everyone stepping up and saying their piece, and then people that's educating themselves, understanding that no matter what I do, this is still something that's terrible to do. It's not right.
You're right. Oh,
Thank you.
good job, lady. Awesome. Really good job. So let me just look at my notes real quick. Good job, Liam. Let's see. So Maya kind of mentioned this, is that what are like some of the myths about domestic violence is that men like can't control themselves and can't control their anger. And that's actually a real myth, because when police are called, let's see, they are able to kind of like flip like a switch and be totally charming. It's not like they're out of control, they're totally in control. And that's one of the serious myths about domestic violence. And so like and a lot of times like that kind of thinking is like is used to excuse hold on used to excuse domestic violence on the part of the man. So let's see. So what does gendered violence have to do with domestic or intimate partner violence? So it's kind of all tied up with gender roles. A lady covered the problem with calling survivors of domestic or intimate partner violence battered women. Let's see. So why don't women leave these kinds of relationships? Lady talked about this a bit, but we can talk about it a little bit more. Why don't women leave these kinds of relationships?
Probably there's some fear behind it. They're afraid that if they try to leave, they're not going to be able to like fully commit to actually leaving and be able to get out of it. And it's going to make it even worse. So sometimes the feeling is just try to stick it out and see if it changes, which is even worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think one of the readings, this is Michelle McKinnon's, she says like that, like in a lot of ways, survivors have been groomed by their partner, who's very controlling. So like partners threaten that if they leave, the partner will kill them or something like that, right? And so while the situation you're in might be horrible and you keep getting abused, it could escalate if you leave. And if they threaten to kill you, they threaten to kill pets. This is like a thing for a lot of women, is like most battered women shelters don't allow you to have animals. And so women have to contemplate leaving their pets behind with an abuser. And like that actually stops a lot of women. Isolation. So a lot of times abusers isolate you from your friends and family. It's very hard to maintain other relationships, especially from women of color, to alienate them from law enforcement. But really, like there's this myth in our culture that like lower income men or men of color are abusers, but when like you control for it, like domestic violence and domestic abuse happens at the same rates for white men as well as men of color. It's just men of color are more commonly prosecuted for it, especially if they are of a lower socioeconomic income, right? So like that's one of the myths, is that it could be because of drugs or alcohol, or it could be because of poverty, or it could be because of mental illness, or it could be because of lack of education. And like these are all myths, or at least that's McKeon's argument, and that it's really about power and control. And like not only is there pressure on women from the abuser to stay with him, but there's often lots of pressure from your family to kind of stay with him. Like, he hit you, but he's trying to do better. You know, your dad hit me, or something like that. What are you going to do with the kids, right? You don't want to break your family. You don't want to come from a broken family. And there's also socioeconomic anxiety. Remember, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't get any paycheck and you don't have any job security and you can't apply for unemployment. And so like there's like literal financial reasons to not leave an abuser because of our legal and because of our legal system. So if you leave him, you could like literally end up homeless, and like that's like such bullshit. It's horrible that women have to kind of weigh that, like, do I stay and keep getting hit and potentially have the kids get hit, or do I leave and potentially end up on the streets and be unable to feed them? Like that is a decision that no one should have to make. And it's not just a law enforcement issue, it's a societal issue. And like some of you were saying, there's very little punishment or accountability for abusers. Can you think of famous abusers that you've come across? Like in media, not like in your personal life, but like in media. You think of famous instances of abuse or famous abusers. So Darian mentioned some football players.
Chris Brown.
Chris Brown beat up Rihanna, and then got a picture of her face all beat up tattooed to his neck, right?
Well, he did that?
Yes, he did.
Man, it's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's like, it's like he's not even sorry, you know?
I watched a Chris Brown documentary. It's actually really sad.
Say more about that. Why is it sad?
Because you kind of hear more of his side about the whole situation. Obviously, there's no excuse for that.
Mm-hmm.
And she went through a lot of traumatizing stuff with him. But it does show, like, he admits in the documentary, like, he needed help and, like, the stuff he did for her, okay, like what affected him and how like his fan base even like still to this day holds it over him. It's just a really good documentary. I cried at it.
That's a good one.
Where did you watch it?
It's on Netflix.
Oh, it is? Oh, good. But yeah, it sounds like it's like very much like more sympathy for the abuser. Like he was struggling with mental issues. He had, you know, this, and he's, because of this, he's like encountered all these difficulties. Yeah. I don't know. That's what it sounds like. Would you say that's true, Anne?
Yeah, it is. I mean, like the documentary kind of unfolded his whole life and everything, but that was like a part of it because he was like, it affected me so much. Like he was saying how depressed he was and everything. Yeah.
It's like he didn't like, yeah. It's like his actual actions are excused.
Yeah, even in the documentary, his voice completely changed. Like when he started talking about it, like you could tell. I don't know. It was like a sick kind of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like everything about it just made you feel sick, and like you could tell that he was disgusted in himself too. So I feel like in a way he knew what he was doing is wrong, but I feel like with a lot of situations with these men, it's that they get angry and they don't know how to control it. Like even with my ex-boyfriend, for example, they get mad and they don't know how to handle their anger, and so the only way they learn is to just pop off. There's no grace to it. It's just kind of like boom.
Yeah. Although that's according to many, that's like actually a myth. That's the myth that our society tells ourselves that men can't control their anger, and that it's actually
denial.
It's more about like controlling women, and like actually on some level at least, and maybe they think that they're angry and they use that to even excuse their actions, or maybe they think they're drunk to even excuse that their actions there. But like on some level, like have you ever heard like you wouldn't like if you something like alcohol just makes you more like likely to do something that you've been thinking about when you're sober?
Yeah,
out of the true self, like, and so like it's weird because like we think of like, oh, you're doing drugs or you're alcohol, like that turns you into a different person, and but like there's evidence that it actually just reveals your true self. And so like it's really that these men feel like something about their lives are out of control and they really just want to control women and children.
I just like, in my personal experience, it was when they were going through their own personal stuff, and it's not like it was a way to take it out on somebody else, but it's like you said, they don't know how to control what they're going through and what's going on in their personal life. So it's like they take it out on you in a way and make you feel like you did something wrong. It's manipulation, I guess.
Yeah, it's manipulation. You guys know, do you know what gaslighting is? Because this is like...
Yeah, I actually just learned about that this past year.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
You want to tell us about it, Anne? It's crazy.
It's basically like, let's say I'm trying to justify my feelings, and like I don't feel like something that somebody said to me was okay, and I try sticking up for myself, and the person that I'm telling this to basically tells me that my feelings are invalid, or tries to make me feel lesser than who I am. Right? Basically what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like part of it. I was thinking of like
They like tell you you sound crazy, or that doesn't make sense, or you're emotional, or basically like telling you that you're just crazy for feeling how you feel, invalidating your feelings.
Like people groom you kind of like to kind of make you start to question yourself, and there's very little confidence in yourself with gaslighting. And also like sometimes if it's really escalating, it can like take the form of like crazy stuff like the abuser will like slightly move all of the furniture in your apartment, and then like you'll like trip over it, and they'll be like, you're so clumsy, like you really need me around to help you out, right? Or like they'll like eat all of something, and you'll be like, where's the chocolate? And they'll be like, well, you ate it.
Like they just do it to make you feel.
Don't you remember? Like they do it to make you feel like you can't trust yourself. You have to only trust them.
It makes me so mad.
Yeah, it's horrible, and it
really does make you feel like you're actually going crazy. Yeah.
See, there's something that like I struggle with, in the sense of like this idea that like going back to the Chris Brown documentary, and like not to like when he says like I was going through a lot, like how depressed he was, but I can't think of like anyone in life that isn't going through something. Like women go through shit, and especially have to deal with like I can't think of a time when like women, when they are going through stuff, hit, or like, I mean, maybe like, I don't know, but like
it happens, but it's a lot less common.
Like it's not an excuse is my point. Like I feel like it's like, well, it's like we all go through shit, and I feel like, so that to me, like that whole point, like sometimes, and I guess I think I have like a pretty like strong view on it, so I guess that might be why I think that. But and like I do have sympathy in the sense for people that don't get the mental help that they need, like for Chris Brown, like, and I do recognize that it's harder, I think, for men to reach out than women. I really do. Like, I think that's a problem. Like I said, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I think that is part of the reason why we have so many cases like this. But at the same time, I think that's an overused excuse for men, in my opinion. But I'm also, like I said, I have a hard.
I definitely agree with that. Like, because the Chris Brown argument is like really like it's old, like it's been going on for a long time, because what happened with him and Rihanna, I don't know, happened maybe like 12 years ago, something like that. Like it was a while, and like I just know that it's like it's been a thing that people have been talking about, whether or not it's like, oh, you like he was wrong completely, or like it can be justified because like Rihanna hit him too, like all these different things. And it's like, oh, and people are saying like, oh, he was going through a lot. And yeah, like while it's true, he was probably going through a lot. Like people, like everyone goes through things like a lot, like what Kiara was saying, like it's like, a lot of times like that's used as an excuse, and it's really not, because Rihanna isn't the only person that Chris Brown has abused. And like it's not like, I mean, although we don't talk about it because it's like, oh, let's just leave it alone. Let's leave Chris Brown alone. Like he's like, that's not the only case. Like he's been taken to court plenty of times for abusing and stalking and having like getting like restraining orders against him, like all this stuff like that. And like he's definitely like struggled with it on multiple occasions. So I think it's not like a thing where it's like you can fixate on that person's, like sometimes you can fixate on the person's circumstances, but a lot of times like the circumstances are like they're just not like a good enough excuse,
because it's a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, a justification for it, in my opinion. Like I think very rare cases that you can find like a loophole where it might be like they've been like there's like, I think in like some cases like this, and I feel like that way honestly on like sexual assault cases too, like just stuff like that. I guess that's just my opinion on it, but like I feel like in terms of Chris Brown, if I'm being honest, I don't know if I have a ton of sympathy for him, in the sense of I mean, I have sympathy, like I said, for the mental health problem, but like at the same time, like, yeah, you've seen the pictures of Rihanna's face, like, I don't know, like that's not a mistake, that's a decision. Like you're making a choice. So I just don't really have a lot of like, I don't think there's literally any justification at that point. Like how mad do you have to get to like, I mean, maybe one time, like I don't know. I just like, I don't know. I feel like pretty strongly on it. I just feel like there's no, like at some point it's not a mistake. It's not like it's like a decision what you're doing. And I think when we have these like loopholes and people try to be like, well, maybe this or that. And like, even like in the terms of like, and I haven't seen the documentary, so I really don't know, but like, I think that's how we continue to let people get away with it or like try to like look for justifications when at the end of the day, I think we need to have a firmer stance. There is just no justification. Like, and sometimes it doesn't make you a bad person. For some people, like doing those things like could be, but I think the only way to teach people that it's not okay is to have a pretty firm stance on it.
And oftentimes, like the consequences, like it's very hard to like kind of prove, especially because usually people are talking to the women and they're like, well, what did you do to set him off? Which again, just kind of goes into this whole narrative about, oh, it's that he, he gets angry, and it's like not that. So like there's a lot of, like you ladies said, victim blaming. And then like for Chris Brown, and this again, you're right on that it's like similar to like rape narratives. Like for Chris Brown, people are like, oh, but he's so talented, like, so like he gets to be a complete person, right? So he gets to have things that define him beyond that, like, and that almost like way more like, yeah, he might be a violent guy, but he's so talented, he's such a good artist, he's such a good musician, and people often use that to kind of excuse it. This was not in the reading, but like this, I have a couple of like statistics, and they're from 2006, so they're not super recent, but they haven't changed that much. So about half of all Canadian women, so this study was done in Canada, were physically or sexually assaulted at least once in their adult lives. And like, that's a kind of crazy statistic. But then also, oftentimes the violence usually starts when a woman is pregnant. Like when I read that, like I couldn't believe it. Like that usually a man or an intimate partner starts hitting a woman when she's pregnant for the first time. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'm never gonna understand that. Cause like, it's one thing, like, it's never okay to put hands on nobody, but specifically with a woman you love and she's carrying your child, like, that don't make no damn sense.
Right. And so like in that way, like it's got to be about power, right? Like that she's like suddenly vulnerable and she's less likely to leave you, and so like that's when you start hitting her, like she's physically vulnerable, she's emotionally vulnerable, like, and then like it's like almost like that's when you start to set the pattern for it. It's go ahead, Anne.
I've heard that it's because the attention isn't fully on them.
Could be.
Like a lot of people with these of like who abuse, the attention needs to be on them and they get jealous. Like even in Chris Brown and Rihanna's situation, their fight that night was because Rihanna was talking to another guy. So it's like, or she went through his phone. There was something about another guy involved and he got jealous. And usually it is jealousy. And so when a woman's pregnant, usually the man feels like the attention isn't on him anymore, or the love isn't going to be the same anymore. And so they get angry and they pop off and things escalate, from what I understand.
Yeah.
That's another thing, like,
it doesn't make sense, but
if you feel insecure about it and you feel like she's doing this, that, and the third, then just be out of there. Like,
I know.
Like, I never understood those type of things. Because men let themselves get to a point where there's no going back, and you do something that's gonna make you regret it for your whole life, pretty much. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it comes to she's texting another guy. Like, that doesn't mean you gotta go to jail over it. You don't gotta do this. Just walk away from the situation. Worst come to worst. That's how I always saw it. So I don't know. Domestic violence.
Well, you bring up a good point. Very few of them do go to jail. Of the men, so Lady talked about how cases are very probably seriously underreported, because there's lots of pressure on women to not report abusers. Men who are arrested prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced, which is really hard, less than 1% of those serve jail time. So there's no real societal repercussions for hitting your intimate partner, for that kind of violence. And that's why it often, like, even if like if you think about you're a woman and you have a controlling, stalkerish, abusive partner, like what are your options? Well, you can get a restraining order, which, you know, doesn't really help when he's like, you know, brings a gun and like murders you on campus, right? Like a restraining order, it's like pretty ineffective, because also there's not too many consequences for breaking a restraining order.
My best friend. Hello. My best friend had to get a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend because he was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And he like wanted to go to the same school. Like they had plans to go to the same school together and everything. But she got the restraining order before she went, and the school still let him go there. Like he ended up going to a party and like hitting her at this party. It was crazy.
And like there's no consequences for breaking a restraining order.
He was an athlete, so they like really wanted him to go there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he ended up getting kicked out of the school because he like kept hitting her and like kept being like, he like saw her talking to another guy, freaked out, poured like booze all over her and stuff. Like it got really intense, but I don't know, it just shows that they really don't care about restraining orders at all. Like school, her mom even like reached out and said like, this guy is like trying to come to this school and like we have a restraining order against him, and they completely like disregarded it and still let him go regardless of that.
And if you're married and your husband hits you and you take it to court, oftentimes like a judge decides what the punishment will be, and oftentimes the punishment is like, oh, you got to go to marriage counseling. It's like, what? Like, why should we go to relationship counseling? Like, why can't you like take me out of a dangerous situation? Please. I'm reaching out for help and I'm not getting it. So this is another kind of problem with our system.
Another thing that I always thought about too is that domestic violence is also such a thing where like if people aren't reaching out to the police or to other people and discussing about it, it's such a hard thing to notice. It's because like there are going to be signs that of course either or can show, but if you do reach out for the signs, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be like, no, that's not happening. They're going to do whatever to protect the significant other. So I feel like at the same time, it's part of being educated, just knowing what to do in each portion of those situations, because those portions are so vital. Like you mess up one part, then everything's gonna go away. Now she's gonna say, no, none of this happened. The police get involved, but you're gonna look stupid.
And I would say like the system needs to be changed to make it easier so that you don't have to like know every piece of whatever before you are able to report.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like have like she's not my actual sister, but she's like a little sister. I mean, I grew up with her. She's like 17 now, and she just got out of like a abusive relationship, and she's like she's a junior in high school. And I think it's like a lot more difficult because they're like in high school, so a lot of like their interactions are like through social media and all that stuff, and she has a restraining order against him. And like what he does is he tells his friends to like hit her up and like Snapchat her and text her and all that stuff. So and then when she goes to like report it to the police or whoever, like they're just like, oh well, do you have evidence that he told his friend to text you? And it's like hard because she's still being manipulated, and like he's definitely violating his restraining order by contacting her through like other people. Like they need like that evidence and stuff like that. So a lot of times like it's hard like to prove things, especially if it's like through social media or like I don't know, like whatever. Like that's like one of the most difficult things is like, and that's why a lot of times like you have that like the victim blaming is because like
victims don't like have like hard evidence if they haven't taken pictures of their injuries. Because I know my little sister, like she's 17, she didn't know to take pictures when her boyfriend was like choking her and something like that. Like she didn't know to take pictures of it. So it's like, oh, if they don't have evidence and stuff like that, and like I like, you know, all these things to prove it, then it's like, oh, well, then what can we really do? Because we don't really know if you're telling the truth or not, which is like really bullshit to me.
Yep. It's like the whole premise of the legal system is innocent until proven guilty, but like it's taken to an extreme like case in these kinds of things to protect men and to protect men's rights, which seem to be, and throughout history have been, the right to, you know, beat up their wives. That's like the rule of thumb. You guys know that saying, the rule of thumb? Do you? Yeah? Do you know where it comes from? It was legal to beat your wife with a stick that was no wider than your thumb. Throughout a lot of history, it's like that's the rule of thumb, and it's like even in our common vocabulary, it's ridiculous. I want to kind of move to the last article for today, which is like hard to talk about, but it's like if we're talking about like instances where family as an institution is quite dangerous for women, but also like girls and children. It's protecting male abusers and punishing the women who confront them, and this is about child sex abuse in America, which is like similar to other kinds of abuse. Do you remember some things from that article? Anyone?
Well, like the one thing that really stuck out to me is that like in order to get her to do these things, like her dad was like, well, you don't want to learn this from like someone else, like let me teach you. And like growing up in like your household, you do think that your dad's like trying to teach you the right thing, so you wouldn't like think anything of it if you knew that, like if you didn't know that it was wrong, but you just know that this person who's supposed to be the one that's like looking out for you is like, yes, let me teach you so that you know for the future.
Right. And so that's part of grooming her. And also like part of it was that like she preferred sexual abuse to the physical beatings. Like, and so again, like women are put in an impossible situation or a double bind where they're having to kind of weigh, would I prefer to be hit or do I prefer to be raped by my father figure? And like, it shouldn't be like that. So that particular case, like it's really hard to prove that as well, like because it's both rape and domestic violence, right? So it's like hard, and usually they can't prosecute it, but in this case they got the father to confess to doing it. And you'd think that would be a slam dunk, you know, the kid if you says it happened, the father says it happened. But because she was 14 and not 13 and had not said no, and because he was her father, he didn't really get much jail time. If it's done, like if sexual abuse is done by one's father, it's not considered rape, it's considered sexual abuse, and that carries a lighter punishment in the legal system, which is just a way our legal system kind of protects a family, specifically as a kind of patriarchal, men in charge, men have the power kind of institution. Only about 5% of cases are reported. 2% of incest and 6% of other sexual abuse is reported. Less than 1% are convicted. Most get counseling or plead out to a lesser offense and are not entered onto a sex registry. Sexual abuse happens in 1 out of 4 families. And that's just a crazy statistic. Most of it's perpetuated by men. So there's all this like stuff about how it's super common, but not talked about or acknowledged, and that men are protected. But the worst part of one of the really worst parts about this article for me is like not only are men protected and allowed to continue the abuse, but how mothers are blamed for it. If a woman of color, or say we have a family of color, oftentimes like mothers lose custody if they allowed the father figure to abuse a child, even though most of them don't know it's happening. A lot of times that girls are more angry at their mother for not protecting them than they are at their actual father for doing the abuse. 60% of them forgave their fathers for abusing them, but 60% still blamed their mothers, even though 75 to 95% of mothers don't know what's happening. Victims tend to blame themselves, abusers seldom do. So it's kind of all tied together, like sexual abuse of children, domestic abuse of women, rape. These are all kinds of ways that men are trying to kind of maintain their power. Let me just check out that worksheet that I gave you. So statistics about family sexual violence, I kind of gave you some of those. Consequences of sexual abuse and sexual violence, there's no consequences practically. So activities. So we kind of talked about we talked about Chris Brown and the modern example of domestic violence, and how maybe your thinking has changed. Can you think of any other examples of men who have committed domestic violence recently? Go ahead, Michael.
So it wasn't actually, well, it was, but I was thinking more of the Johnny Depp and Bird case. I don't know if you've heard about it, but Johnny Depp was abused by his ex-wife, Amber Heard, like a lot, apparently. I just read into it a little bit, not too much, but it did go back and forth, so both of them were abusing each other. But she was also like a huge contributor to the Me Too movement and all these big organizations fighting against domestic violence and stuff. So she was like in the spotlight, but then also was like a serious domestic abuser, mentally and physically. So it's sort of like, it's a weird situation because they're both abusing each other, and not that that makes it right whatsoever.
Right.
But it's sort of just weird to think that anything can happen. Like, you never know, even if someone's right in the spotlight being an advocate for domestic abuse and domestic violence.
Yeah, and you really want to believe women, right? Because they're so often discarded and disregarded. And then of course there's always like one case that people hold up and use and be like, well, look, she's an abuser too, like it happens to men too. And so there's a Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, there's Chris Brown. Any other recent ones that you're thinking about?
There's also the one with it was a while back though. It was Kareem Hunt. There was really a video of like him punting his wife.
Yeah.
And, like, what was that?
Yeah, I remember that one. Is that the one? Maybe I don't. There's a lot for football players. Was that the one where there was like a video of him?
I think it was him in a video in like a hotel, and really like punted her like feet, like foot to face, like punted.
Yeah. Yeah.
No excuses for that
Yeah.
one.
So there's that one, and wasn't Jay-Z hit by, not Beyonce, but her sister, whose name is Solange? Wasn't Jay-Z being hit by her? There's video of that, right?
Oh yeah, that was in the elevator.
Yeah. And so, like, I don't know, it's just like this culture of violence that maybe needs to kind of be examined and changed in America. So I was going to show you a couple examples. So we have 15 minutes left. Nicole Brown Simpson. So that is the woman in the case of O.J. Simpson. Do you guys know about that? a little bit, sort of famous. And the other one was Tracy Thurman. So this was they call this like the Thurman laws. Like this is like how we finally got laws against like hitting women. So let me see what I can. Which one would you guys prefer, Thurman or the O.J. Simpson? I'm gonna try to get them both in, but if I can't,
Maybe OJ.
okay. Let's see Thurman. And if you ever want to kind of look at it online or for like your next analytic response, I'll post it. So let's see. Nicole. So the OJ one is like it's like a kind of like a transcript and recording of the calls that Nicole Brown Simpson made to police. Hold on. Let me see. Do you guys know about O.J. Simpson? Who is he?
Yeah. He was a famous football player. I believe he played for the Bills and I think 49ers or something like that. But he was a figurehead in his community. I mean, everybody loved him. And there was suspicion that he murdered his wife, and he did not get convicted of it. And then he went off to get arrested for a number of different crimes and spent time in jail. I think he's out now, though.
Yeah, I think so. O.J. Simpson. Well, let me see. I don't have Hulu anymore, or else I would know where to kind of show it to you. Maybe I have it in my notes. So he was a really famous guy. And let's see. Made in America documentary. So if you have Hulu, you can hear it like in part 1 with 48 minutes left. I'm gonna try to find it on YouTube. He was also like I called him Juice because he like was an OJ, like an orange juice sponsor, because his name was OJ. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to I don't know, this might be a little sketch, but I'm gonna show it to you anyway. And I think I need to do something to make sure. Select the microphone. Let's see if you can hear it. Can you hear it? No. Let me see. How's that? Nope. Let's see. Select a microphone, select a speaker. How's that?
Okay, what does he look like? He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record. Did you just think so? Okay, what is he doing there? He just drove up again. He just drove me over. Okay, wait a minute, what kind of car is he in? He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in. Okay, wait a minute, what's your name? Nicole Simpson. Okay, is he the sportscaster or whatever? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Wait a minute, we're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you? I'm going nuts. Has he threatened you in any way, or is he just harassing you? You're going to hear him in a minute. He's about to come in. Okay, just stay on the line. I don't want to stay on the line. He's going to beat the shit. Wait a minute. Just stay on the line so we can know what's going on till the police get there, okay? Okay, Nicole? Just a moment. Does he have any weapons? I don't know. Okay. He went home, now he's back. The kids are upstairs sleeping, and I don't want anything to happen. Okay. Has he hit you today or no? No. Okay, you don't need any paramedics or anything? Okay. You just want him to leave? My door. He broke the whole back door in. And then he left and he came back? And he came and he tried to just knock my upstairs door down, but he pounded it, and then he screamed and hollered, and I tried to get him out of the bedroom because the kids were sleeping in there. Okay. And then he wanted somebody's phone number, and I gave him my phone book and I clicked my phone book down to write down the phone number that he wanted, and then he took my phone book with all my stuff in it. The dispatch. What? What did he say? Well, you your domestic violence at 30 Cartier 325 South Gregory Way. The suspect is now entered in the shelter. And it is confusing the lead. It's called 200 and 4221 RD825 children. Just stay on the line, okay? And see if that was something that you did. It always comes back.
All right. So what were some of the things you heard in that recording that kind of stood out to you?
She said that it always comes back. He always comes back, back and forth. Doesn't care that the kids are upstairs sleeping. Yeah.
Just saying that like it's based on something that she apparently did long ago that he keeps getting on her about. So the fact that he just can't let this one thing go.
One thing that stuck out to me that the dispatcher said is she like asked if he was hitting her or if it was just harassing her.
Right.
Like don't think that's where you should just use the word just.
Right. Yeah. Like, I think, and you know, like she's asking, basically she's like, do you need paramedics? And I feel like she just should have asked that. Do you need paramedics? Are you hurt? Rather than, is he hitting you or are you just being harassed? Right. My internet is terrible right now. How are you guys doing? You still with me?
Yes.
And the dispatcher also asked, like, is he angry about something you did? Which again is like, I don't know if that's really necessary information, right? Like, does it matter that she did something?
It's not necessary information for the dispatcher. Like, that doesn't really matter unless they're trying to figure out that, like, she abused him or something. But then again, that's not even a question that they should be asking. That's more like questioned by the police or whoever upon arrival.
Yeah, right. And like, it kind of feeds into the myth that like women are at fault, kind of feeds into the victim blaming kind of thing, right?
Yep.
So you guys know what happened to Nicole Brown Simpson, the wife?
She was murdered.
She got stabbed to death.
Yeah, she and a guy she was with, and that was after she and OJ had divorced. So she was able to divorce him, and it's kind of sort of accepted that he did it, even though he was acquitted. And that was kind of a famous trial. So if you're curious about this at all, the OJ Simpson series Made in America is really good. It's a documentary series. Netflix has one, but it's like a fictionalized version. That one's not as good. Ross Geller is like in it, or whatever that actor is, but it's hard to see him as anything other than Ross Geller. And there are parts of that interpretation that are okay, but like I would watch the Hulu Made in America documentary series, because you can really see like you can really see, it's a really good example of like the intersections of how like race and gender and violence and class and celebrity status are all kind of intersecting in a way that like protects this one abuser. It's just a really interesting case study to kind of see at play, like all the things that we've been looking at, how they're at play. So Tracy Thurman, I'll post a video about that if you ever want to use that for your next analytic response. So let me talk about what's here for next time. Okay, so that was that. So here's like some stuff from the Tracy Thurman stuff, but like she survived, but like you can do some research into it. She survived 13 stab wounds and a broken neck. And she's like the reason why we have a lot of it happened in Connecticut, why we have a lot of domestic violence laws now. Okay, so next class is on welfare. Michael, you're presenting. Welfare state, exploding. Okay. Yeah, so I'll have the activity ready to go at the beginning of class for today. If you look at April 2nd, make sure to download this activity. Give it to you. Here it is. And fill this out, complete it by midnight for a potential 3 points. Any questions? Let me look at when your next analytic response is due. So it's due Friday. No, today is Thursday. Right? So it must be due Tuesday? Monday? Ugh.
What's the date that it's due?
April 4th.
Saturday.
That's this Saturday? Yeah. Yep. How you guys, are you in a good position to kind of work on that? So if it's due this Saturday, you can write about domestic violence. You can write about the family. You can write about power at work. You can also write about stuff that we kind of talked about in the last unit that you haven't talked about yet, like intersectional dating. So if you wanted to like look at like the film Get Out and intersectional dating, you could do that. You could talk about gender and sports, or abortion and reproductive justice. So all of those are fair game, and all of the readings are down here at the bottom. So that's unit 2 and unit 3 past classes. All of this stuff is down there. Okay. All right. So again, like soft deadline on this analytic response. It's technically due Saturday, but just kind of around Saturday. Let me know how it's going, okay?
Sounds good.
Yay. All right. So have a good weekend, guys. Hope you're not going too crazy, and I'll see you Monday.
Have a nice weekend, Professor.
Thanks.